Yay! I'm gonna I'm going to stop now because it goes on for a long time. I want to get into talking. Bevan Manson. Yay, Bevan Manson. Thank you, Bevan, for sitting in today.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, totally great.
Okay, great.
And
Yeah,
Bevan's
pleasure.
Bevan's sitting in because who was my guest? Oh, Gina Eckstein had to postpone. So Bevan kindly accepted my invitation to sit in. I really want to have Bevan on again for a whole time because we had a great time last time we were talking. Hi, Bev.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How's the weather there?
You know, it's nice and sunny, but it's cold compared to California. It's mid 40s right now, and it
Yeah.
goes down into the 20s at night in Albuquerque. So not my favorite weather, to say the least. But I have a fairly large studio here and getting a lot of things done. You know, just trying to keep making music no matter what. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
really important.
Mm-hmm.
I think musicians just want to make music and give us a break, will you? There, somebody.
Uh, your playing is so good, you know. I mean, it's I mean, you could just have enough. Hi, Roland. Roland says hi. Roland asked
Hey,
me.
Roland.
Um, you know, you're playing. I mean, it's enough that you're a conductor, a composer, an arranger, and you have both classical and jazz. But then add to that, your playing is so great too. So it always, every time I hear you, I feel lifted into a special universe.
Oh, thanks. No charge to this universe. It's free. Um, cover charge, though. Cover charge.
Right.
All alternate universes have a cover charge. I found that out. You know, it's funny. I was just listening to that track from YouTube. That's a really enterprising guy, Joseph Pernicano, bass player, who's an engineer at CBS, and he started this LA jazz channel a while ago. He has all kinds of different musicians on it, and some guys are relatively regulars on it, but others are guests from all over the place, in especially LA.
It's still
And,
going now.
and no, not right now, but he's planning as soon as things get calmer to start it up again. It used to be a couple of Wednesdays a month,
Oh,
and you know, it's broadcast on YouTube. It's a YouTube channel, so you can always access it. There must be hundreds of videos that he's done. It's really amazing what he's done, and
great. The sound was great.
yeah, he's a great engineer. And but it's funny. I was listening to it, and I was listening to it's one of my favorite tunes, ESP,
Yeah.
the Wayne Shorter
Me
tune
too.
that
Yeah.
Miles Davis first played, recorded on the album ESP. But I like to do it actually. I like to do it in different ways. I like to do it as a bossa nova, actually, slower, because it has a very great deal of harmonic richness in it. But I was noticing something during the playing. I mean, I like to, you know, one of the great things about jazz is that you can tell a story in the moment.
Yeah.
And I try to do that. I'm kind of old school that way. You know, I like the melody, so I like to play around with the melody, and I like to develop things, and I like to collaborate, you know, interact with drums and bass. Kendall Kay, great drummer in
Yeah.
LA,
Yeah.
is so much fire and energy, and really kind of got involved in that interpretation. And Dan Boise, the alto player, has got a nice sound. He's a regular on that show.
Really good.
And but I was thinking about melody when I was listening to it. I was thinking about the original melody, and I was thinking about how for many people maybe this is too abstract, maybe the playing is just too abstract because you can't necessarily after a while follow what's going on unless you're very familiar with the harmonic structure of the tune. And I was thinking about singers. I was thinking, geez, there should have been a singer on that. Just because, the thing about singers, among other things, and believe me, there's a lot of things, as you know,
I'm not sure that was good or bad.
No, it's good. It's
Okay.
good. Good things. I'm going to do a vocal album called Good Things. Is that they more often than not, it's their job to communicate the melody to the audience, and to, of course, usually there's words, so you're communicating the words as well, but the melody is something that singers want to make memorable. And so I love working with singers because of that, because I like, at least initially, sticking around with the melody and finding out what it's all about. And of course, singers can take liberties with the melodies, but they have so much respect for them, and they know the inside and outside of the melodies, the inner workings of the melodies. So I'm always, I love working with singers, and I'm always in favor of, singers and instrumentalists collaborating together, whether it's live or on recordings, the chemistry that can happen, but also the fact that the melody will be showcased.
Yeah.
And, that's also a boon to the composer, the songwriter or the composer, also to have the melody showcased that way. I think sometimes as instrumentalists, we are so taken with the trees in the forest, so to speak, the details of what we can do with the structure of the piece, especially during improvisation, is that we get away from the communication and we get into, what we know we can do with it, which can be great, which is also great. But I think it's also a temptation sometimes to get into the technical things so much that we lose track of the expressive things, of course, which melody is such a primary element.
Yeah, melody and lyrics, of course.
And lyrics too. And the thing is, I was listening to Patricia Barber the other day.
Yeah.
And she's very subtle, and she communicates certain expressive things just by singing the song itself.
Yeah.
Almost straight, almost without doing anything to it. But then on ensuing choruses, or even in the bridge, the middle of the tune, you start to notice that she does these little expressive things. I try to teach, my students about this, about melodic embellishment and just a little bit of melodic altering before they get into the intricacies of harmony, which, of course, I'm a big proponent of. But I try to show them the little things, the little places in the song pertaining to the melody where, if you just change one little thing here, all of a sudden you have another expressive device that communicates something. It can be something that you do with the voice. It can be something that you do maybe you add one or two notes to it. I notice she does that. Of course, many singers do this. She does it in her own particular way. But I was just intrigued because what it does, when a singer does that, it kind of lets you in onto another dimension of the song.
Mm.
There's so much richness to well-composed melodic songs, whether they're Great American Songbook or, maybe more contemporary. But there's so much craft and so much detail, actually, that's inherent in them. And someone like her, I noticed how she was just drawing a few little things out, just a few little expressive things out by maybe changing one or two notes or adding one or two notes. And suddenly you have a completely different emotion. It's deepened. The emotion can be deepened, or it can it leads you to another viewpoint on the song that you might not have thought of when you just think of that particular song. I'm trying to think of Early Autumn. That's the one I was. She has
Oh,
a recent album out that's just her piano
oh.
and voice, and
Is she, well, what I remember listening to her is that her harmonic substitutions were very dramatic. And I feel like that's why she didn't have to really change the melody, because the melody was part of that harmonic redevelopment, don't you think?
yeah, that's definitely part of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely part of it, especially when she plays, on her own piano
Yeah.
and on her own. But also, even just in the vocal line, sometimes that gets interjected just a little bit,
Yeah.
just gets interjected. And it made me think, I mean, not that the two have that much in common, and yet they do in a way because they're both so expressive. Um, is that, someone like Ella Fitzgerald, who's
I was just going to
bursts,
say her. Yeah.
just bursts with expressiveness and
But she's extremely subtle too. Like what the things that make her brilliant are subtle, and and people who might not be students of that, might just go, "Oh, it really sounds good,"
yeah.
and not exactly know why. But I mean, when you listen with a schooled ear to her, you really see what she's doing, which is magnificent.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's another reason I love these collaborations between singers and musicians. I mean, I think of Ella with Louis Armstrong, or uh, really any one of her small group recordings, but also her studio orchestra recordings
Yeah,
where it seems as though her voice gets orchestral. It just gets to
yeah,
be so gorgeous, enhanced by all the strings and other instruments, but it rises to the occasion that way. But and then in terms of what we just heard, I was thinking of Dan, the alto player's playing. He'll there's no question, even though most young players today are quote modern jazz players in the jazz world. They retain, if they're good players, they retain some aspects of the vocal tradition in jazz, which was certainly so prominent during the swing era. I mean, just little things like vibrato here and there, and lipping up to a note, Deutz, uh, just little changes in timbre, all very vocal things. I haven't listened to that cut for a while. I noticed he was doing some of that. And on these recordings, with someone like Ella or so many other people, you hear this little, if they're instrumentalists playing, you hear this back and forth between them and the singers. It's really great because suddenly, not only are they instrumentalists, but everybody becomes a singer, and the singer becomes an instrumentalist in a way.
yeah,
So there's so much connection. I love it because it's communal. I
yeah.
mean, God knows we need more of that in general anyway, but it's just such a great example.
Did you hear Cassandra Wilson's version of ESP?
No, I haven't heard that. I'd be very interested.
Yeah, I think it's on her Traveling Miles record, and yeah, it's really beautiful, and she's singing the melody, and the tone of her voice, and the instrumentation on her records. There's, especially the earlier ones are just really beautiful. I mean, they were such unique musicians together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because
Yeah, there's so
that's a
many
beautiful
examples.
song. ESP. That's I don't know if we ever talked about that, but when I was when I was old enough to choose my own music, I mean, before that, I was listening to my dad's music, which was Ella and Rosemary Clooney and Stan Kenton. And then when I got to Berkeley, I started listening. Well, I was listening to Miles a lot, and ESP and that whole era. Oh God, it's just like really great, just great music,
Yeah.
great playing. That space that was created, it was
Yeah.
so alluring, and
Well, I think that space, it's interesting you're saying that because, even very young musicians today, like there's a vibraphonist from New York, Joel Ross, who's about 26 years old. And he was commenting on, I mean, those Miles records are from the 60s, and he was commenting on still how he just a few years ago discovered them, and how the space was just such a revelation to him. Yeah. And you can hear it in his own playing. But I also think that I don't know, I might have to, let's see if you can hear this electric piano. Probably pretty soft, huh?
Yeah, soft.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Okay. Well, I also think, one of the things he was talking about was space, which of course, everybody, you need space in music because you need statements that have, beginnings, middle, and ends. And,
right.
You have to have a period sometimes. You can't just keep playing all the time on and on. You have to have a place. And I think one of the things that people overlook is the space that's inherent in either the harmonic or the melodic structure. I mean, ESP is a really sort of simple example of that, because the melody, Wayne Shorter keeps the melody the same. I mean, it's mostly a repeated figure, but the harmony changes underneath that. It's rather ambiguous. It doesn't necessarily imply a tonal center until you get to. In a way, there's two tonal centers. There's one that could be going to F, and there's one that could be going to E flat. And you don't really know, but the spaciousness of it is set up by that repetitive melodic figure, so that even though you're not aware of it, unconsciously the harmony is dictating the interest. The melody is stable. It stays the same. And what I love to do is say, okay, harmony, you gave me an opening there, baby. I'm going for it, or oh, sorry, a little bluesy thing. There's so many openings there. The harmony has got that inherent instability in it. The melody is the stabilizer, but that very instability gives you a lot of openings to add, as I just did, a lot of other substitutions or harmonic directions to go in. Yeah. And so I think that's inherent in, as the composer may or may not have intended that, but it's inherent in the structure there. And so you can take advantage of that. And then, of course, melodically, I mean, my gosh, so few notes. So, there's so few notes you can add, without totally leaving the melody.
Do you think this is this the same kind of idea applicable to Jobim? Because I find that Jobim, a lot of times the melodies are so simple or repetitive. Look at, what's that song? I recorded it, Black and White. What is that?
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I mean, that song, the melody continues so long, the same. And the harmonics are, the harmony is changing behind it, and it makes it gorgeous.
Yeah. Well, he's a master of harmony. Along the lines of ESP, Girl from Ipanema, a very similar kind of idea in that the melody is very stable at the beginning. It's the
Yeah.
same idea, and then the harmony changes, but it goes up, a little bit here and there. But the melody is very stable. There's so much space, and also Jobim, I think, is a master. This is another thing, another reason why I love to hear singers working with material like that, because there's so many harmonic avenues that he hints at that you can go to. Uh, you know, but he also defines things really well. But in Go From Ipanema, I mean, it's the same thing as in, I mean, the same kind of harmonic movement initially as in Take the A Train or something. But, the melody stays the same. It's just the same idea. There we have a definite tonal direction, a tonal center. We can feel it going to F major. But my gosh, there's so much space.
That's nice.
I mean, there's just so many things that you can do because the harmony is so intriguing, and yet it invites you to create more.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm wondering, Roland is asking something, and I think it applies to how you hear. Roland said it always boggles his mind when he witnesses somebody like you, which is a combination of probably more than classical and jazz. But for you, it's real obvious that classical and jazz are huge for you. And Roland said, is it something conscious, or is it intuitively subconscious?
I think it's both. I mean, not to be too ambiguous, but I think that's a really good question, Roland. And if you've witnessed me doing that, you might be in the witness protection program, because it is so subtle. It's really subtle. So what Roland is asking is, the thought process is that how spontaneous is that given the material that you have? But I think there are a couple of things. I'm sure other musicians would add to my list, but I think a couple of things come to mind right away how this happens. One is the experience of simply, playing, working so much, playing so many gigs with the same tune material over and over again. Bill Evans is a good example. I mean, his whole life, there were some tunes that he stuck with his whole life. And just played over and over again and re-recorded over and over again. Same tune, but his conception of it grew and grew. So, in terms of details in that, if you play a lot of gigs and you work with so many different people, the chances are that at least there's the potential to develop, alternatives, whether they're harmonic alternatives, melodic alternatives, rhythmic alternatives, ways of interacting with the other musicians. After, years and years of doing that, you might be developing a certain language that incorporates all these alternate things, just because you get a chance to, you're basically taking a chance.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I just saw something I hadn't looked at before. So I've thought of that over the years, how people do that. Benny Maupin, he actually always records and performs Message to Prez, the song that you and I recorded. And it's always, of course the head is the same, but it always then goes, to wherever it goes, and wonderful. But thinking about it from my point of view, I probably can't do my own originals very much, because every time I play with somebody new, they're playing what's on the paper, and so I don't really have anywhere much to go, because I'm always kind of having that kind of consistent harmonic treatment. But when I call a standard and I suggest we do it differently, then, somebody like yourself has played that song hundreds and hundreds of times. So that can be a jumping off point. I just never looked at that. That's now I know.
Yeah, you hit it on. That's right. And the thing about, say, your own tunes is that, well, maybe you're working with somebody who's never played them before. So yeah, you're right. They're basically playing what's on the page. But if they were to, work with you for over a period of time, that might change. They might come up with alternate things that, and again, these alternate things, I mean, like when I just played Go from Ipanema, I mean, I wouldn't do that necessarily in every situation. It depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
It depends on the bass player. It depends on the drummer. It depends on
the audience, probably, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, doing something like, let's pretend that was your tune and that you have a new group and they've never played it before, so they're reading the material and they would see, it's essentially the basic progression. They might just do that.
Yeah.
But then somebody might do. But only, and this is really discipline, only if the musical moment allows enough space to do it. That's a discipline. You don't want to just throw it in there. You want it to be appropriate. Denny Zeitlin's trio, his material allows for a lot of situations like that where you can do that kind of thing. And I'm sure he was partly inspired, in the old days by Bill Evans and also by Miles Davis. But Roland pointed out, Roland, that's a really big, important question. One of the other implications you made is, so what about the classical side? Does that come into play spontaneously, or is it something, that you think about beforehand? And I guess there's a lot of answers to this, but again, it boils down to the material that you know, and some of that has to do with form. This is a huge issue right now over the last, I think, 20 or 30 years at least, because form, there are a lot of different musical forms. And classical music, for instance, Indian music from Asia, Indian music, Western European classical music, both those genres have very many complex forms. And just like song form, which most people have an acquaintance with one way or the other, you have to kind of hear repeated iterations of it and maybe even study it a little bit, and hear different people play the same form but with their own take on it a number of times, maybe for months or years, until it becomes internalized in your hearing. And I think, seriously, one of the great tragedies of our time is that, as opposed to film or television or the internet, for some reason, and I think a lot of it has to do with this, many people have difficulty following musical form because they're just simply not familiar with it. I mean, for me, it's very easy for me to think about something, say, Beethoven, and a form he would use, sonata allegro form, and it would be very simple for me, and this is just an observation, I'm not pushing myself at all, except out the window. But it would be easy for me to incorporate that within a jazz situation.
Yeah, because
It'd
you're
be really
so
easy for me to
familiar
do
with
it. But that's because I've listened for years and years and years to that particular form. And somebody can put a musical example using that form in front of me, and I can follow it just like it was, say, for a lot of people, it was a football game, or because I know the rules.
Yeah.
I know the general outline of it and how it's supposed to go. And if somebody ingenuous does something different with it, I can hear it and I can tell. But a lot of people, and so in jazz, for instance, there's a lot of folks using classical influences now in jazz.
Yeah.
Not always with form, but sometimes with form. But sometimes the listeners get impatient because they can't follow it, because they're just simply not familiar with it. And that's a real tragic problem, I think, because it invalidates all this incredible human achievement and enrichment that these forms have allowed for over the centuries, literally. And so I would say that when those influences come into play in say, a jazz situation, then it might be spontaneous, but more often than not, it's probably as a result of, pre-thinking, working it out beforehand, because it has to be made very, very intentional to the listener that way. I'm not saying that's always the case.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a good, I can think of a couple of examples. For instance, this is not exactly a classical form, but there's Duke Ellington suite, Such Sweet Thunder.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful piece. When I was in school, my teachers made us analyze it very closely, and I forgot everything I knew about it for a long time. But over the years, I've gone back and listened to it, and it's based on little episodes from Shakespeare's plays. And so there's one piece which is about Puck, the Shakespearean character, mischievous little character in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Now, you don't have to know anything about that, but in a way, I think it was probably unconscious. Duke, when he wrote this, probably along with Billy Strayhorn, he used a very different form. It wasn't really song form, even though it used aspects of song form. He used a form where certain phrases come back in a way that has a little bit of a relationship to a classical rondo, a little bit, and some other things too. It's very, very subtle, and he wrote it around, one of his great soloists at the time, who was Clark Terry, in the late 50s. And so Clark actually, at the end of it, he does kind of an imitation of Shakespeare's words. I forget the exact phrase, but it's da 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 da. Oh, what something are these somethings be, and he actually, with his, I'm sure this was intentional on Duke's part. He just had Clark literally speak it through the flugelhorn, da 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 da. And lots of people know that phrase from Midsummer Night's Dream. But before that, in the form, he's actually acting as the soloist, but he's also, in a way, Puck himself, which is a good choice because Clark Terry was pretty puckish. Not only embouchure, but,
Yeah.
I don't know what his kissing technique was like, but...
Sorry, hold on. You can keep talking. I'm just,
Sure.
My husband.
Sure. But anyway, he enables the piece to happen so that the phrases, there's some things that repeat in a very interesting way. The structure is very, very different from just a regular song form where you might have, a theme, and then the theme gets repeated again. We call it the A section. and then there's an alternate idea, which we call the B section of the bridge, and then maybe the A section comes back. That's a real standard workhorse of a form.
Yeah.
But in this form, it's different. There's a classical element in that these phrases are presented and orchestrated differently every single time they happen. There's a very unusual instrumentation that acts.
Every time it's played?
Yeah, every time in the piece it's played, there's a something happens with the orchestration. They're different instruments. Of course, Duke Ellington was famous for combining unusual combinations of instruments, as opposed to someone like Count Basie, who used mass orchestration, choirs of instruments in a more standard kind of way. I believe, if my memory is right, there's a trio of clarinet, trumpet or flugelhorn, and violin, Ray Nance on violin. There's a trio. It's either that or maybe sometimes it's trombone, clarinet, and violin that play over an ostinato figure in the bass and drums. And it subtly changes every time it comes back. And then it alternates with the entire band as a whole. Other instruments come to the fore. And it's a very persuasive form that he uses. And it's very compact. It's very economical, the way classical forms in the traditional classical canon are, with themes being developed and being very tightly connected to each other. Also,
I'm just curious, when you say it's persuasive, what are you speaking of? The persuasive for the audience to be brought in?
Yeah, because he uses, as in the classical canon, he uses the same material over and over again, but just change it. He develops it just in a few little ways.
So people are familiar with it.
Exactly. And there's alternate parts. There's a little bluesy kind of phrase that Clark Terry plays, ba da da la do da, just swung hard, and so there's a feeling of familiarity to it. But the little trio I talked about, one brass instrument, violin, and clarinet, I think that's what it is. They're in a relatively high register some of the time, which again creates, it's a little what we call in classical music a tone poem. It's atmospheric. It sort of tells a little story about this mysterious little sprite, Puck, mischievous, and the band, comes in sometimes swinging, but other times there's a stasis to it. And you don't quite know where it's going. Again, in a lot of good classical music, you know the form, but you don't quite know, where's it going to go? Is it going to go to a different key? Is something different going to happen? And he does that quite a lot in this piece. But to answer your question, I know there's a very long answer, Roland. This is obviously all predetermined. It was all worked out. Maybe a little bit of what Clark played is improvised. I'm sure that's the case. But it was improvised within as opposed to just a soloist playing whatever they know. It's played, he plays it within the context, the emotional and harmonic and interpretive context of what that particular piece is about. As far as I know, there is no other piece in jazz like this. Wow. There's a lot of pieces that use some of the same conception, but in terms of the way this is set up, there's no other piece exactly like this.
Don't you think that's a really challenging skill for a soloist to be in that position, where they can play the form but yet solo within that?
Yes. Well, I think even for a singer who's in a new orchestral setting or a new big band setting or new large ensemble setting, even if it's all predetermined.
Yeah.
I think it's a tremendous challenge to say, okay, how can I fit in? And, it's funny, it's really great that you mentioned that, because I think that's always a big concern in terms of the listener's ability to understand what's going on. It's really important for soloists in those contexts to be part of the story, and rather than just sing or play what they know, it might just be a singer adopting to the emotional content of the piece and altering his or her voice in a way that matches that emotional thing. If it's, let's say it's a very cool introspective piece, they're not gonna pretend that, they're Ethel Merman in Hello, Dolly. They're going to, be, Helen Merrill in a Gil Evans arrangement. They're going to adopt to the situation. The same thing with the soloist. I actually had I'd love to play you a little bit of this thing.
Yeah.
Actually, it reminds me, because I had this experience with a couple of my soloists on a piece that I've been working on in this pandemic time. We have our options limited, but this is an sort of a studio orchestra piece that I've been working on for a while, and the original tracks have had various overdubs done. And of course, in this time, I'm just overdubbing one person at a time, pretty much. And it's a piece where that comes into question, like how do you as a singer or a soloist fit into it? And I had two folks who I think, Tierney Sutton on vocals, a couple of other singers are on this, and also Joe Locke, the vibraphonist from New York, who both did a great job, but they both spent some time asking me, essentially, I want to make sure, how do I fit in? I want to make sure I'm doing, is what I'm doing fitting in to the structure that you've created? And so there's a lot of things I know they can do that they didn't do, but they deliberately didn't do it because they wanted to fit into this vast emotional structure that I'd created that's actually very contemplative in a lot of ways. It's about trees, specifically about the redwoods in Northern California, where I haven't been for quite a long time, but I remember having, I guess the only way to describe it is kind of a religious experience, being amongst the trees, so beautiful and magnificent and so quiet, and just trying to listen to the trees rather than, talk to whoever I was with or anything. And I don't think it's any coincidence that at the end of World War II, the victors brought all the parties together who were involved in the war to one of the places in Marin where the redwoods were very prominent, and had a conference there within those trees to try to form the United Nations. They wanted everybody to be connected and to be peaceful, and that's where that started. I'm not sure which redwood forest that was. It might have been one of the southern ones, but just north of San Francisco. And it's just such a peaceful area. And I was, the piece is entitled Redwood. I have a sextet version of it also, but this was an orchestral arrangement that I did. And I'd love to play a little bit of it because you might hear how the soloists fit themselves in completely to the mood.
I'd love that.
Instead of just playing or singing what they know, that with all their wonderful technique and exuberance, they held back a little bit. And I feel from the soloists, I feel a feeling of reverence. That's the only word, which was wonderful for me because it fit right in to that mood. And yet there's a lot of feeling of growth. I mean, these trees grow, to 300 feet high. They're amongst the largest living things on earth. And even though the forests are very still and silent, there's this feeling of motion
Yeah.
at the same time, and reverence, if you come to it that way. So anyway, let me try and just play.
Beautiful. And also, while you're looking, Roland would like to know the name of the Duke Ellington piece you were discussing.
Well, the album is called Such Sweet Thunder, and I will, you know what, Roland, I may have to email you the exact time. I think it's the fifth cut on the record. It was on Columbia, which was not CBS at the time. And I think it's "Oh, what fools these mortals be." I think that's that line that
yeah.
Clark Perry kind of imitates at the end. I think
Yeah.
that's the title of the piece, "Oh, what fools these mortals be."
Cecily's here, and she actually said that line.
Oh,
And also Sandy Cummings is here, and she was, you can read this afterwards, but she was talking about how the variations that you played really turned her on as a singer, you know, and subliminally informed her that she could release and go places, which of course you want as an adventurous jazz singer. You're listening, you're hoping for that from the pianist. You know, you're hoping that they're going to sense, or that they're going to express themselves in a way that you feel like, oh yeah, I can be free here.
right. Oh, I totally agree. Hi, Cecily. Hi, Sandy. I hope Culver City and Santa Barbara are doing good for you. So yeah, I totally agree. Anyway, I think I can just play this here, since, let me just double check and make sure I'm sharing music with you.
Doug Webb says, "Sonnet in Search of Amour."
That sounds like it. Yeah, exactly. So this piece is called Redwood. I orchestrated it for strings and woodwinds, rhythm section, and the main soloist is Tierney Sutton, and also Joe Locke on vibes. I'll just play a little bit of it for you here. Just let me know if you can hear it. Let's just see. Hold on 1 second here. Okay, here we go. Can you hear it?
Yeah. Could be louder.
How's that?
Could be louder. Yeah.
Redwood tree in God's glory, you've stood here years and years to tell your story. From jack pine to lupine, coastline to skyline, your spirit's revealed in your majesty. Sun drenched in sea breeze, oh, tells me. Listen, listen.
Anyway, it goes on
Beautiful.
for quite some time.
It's really
But
beautiful. I can so hear you in there.
can you hear me? Oh, wait, I
Beautiful.
can't hear you now.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Oh, that's
Um,
weird. Oh, maybe I have to turn this off.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Why can't I hear you?
We've lost contact. That was gorgeous. And Bevan's done definitely a bunch of arrangements for me. He and I worked on a project called the Jazz Chamber, which had a small chamber orchestra, and he did 5
Can you hear me?
arrangements. I can hear you.
I can't hear you. That's the problem.
Huh. I'm,
Weird.
yeah. Hello.
Let me
So,
see.
yeah,
Hold on one second.
I'm not muted. But
Chat.
so, and then he also did some
You're not
orchestra
muted.
things for me.
Wonder why I can't hear you. Let's see. Do I have to turn off original sound? No.
I think so.
Wait a minute. Let me go to my computer. Maybe my computer got confused.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Technology. Sound.
Um,
I'm just coming through the computer microphone.
we'll find out, Roland. I think he said he
Hold on a
was
second. I'm going to
working
get the
on
fire department. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
That means he's getting his wife. Yeah, it's really gorgeous, isn't it, Doug? Yeah. And Doug Webb is here, who's going to be on in about 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks on January 18th. Great sax player.
So I don't
Doug's
have to turn
probably
off original
played a lot
sound.
with Bevan, I'm sure.
But what did I do? I
Hi,
just
Jenny. She can't hear me, but she saw me wave. She's a great violinist. She was on my jazz chamber project too, which we did about 3 years ago.
is
And
that something I should be concerned about?
hello.
They can
And-
hear me, but I can't hear you guys.
Correct.
So you're not, Kathy's not muted.
Ask,
Nope.
I'm wondering if Kathy, if you should just leave the meeting and come back in.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll
Okay.
try that.
Okay.
Station break.
Yeah, a
leave.
little after this, I'll
Okay,
play 1 or 2 cuts from what Bevan did for me. Really beautiful. We did with Fish to Birds, my 7-piece vocal improv group. We did a Benny Maupin song called "Message to Prez," and we did our Fish to Birds thing, which is very improvisational with a little bit of leading from Bevan, and we had Brad Dutz on percussion. And then Bevan took the whole thing and he made it into 3 movements. It was crazy. He's a crazy genius. Then we had Benny Maupin come in and play bass clarinet through it, and it was really beautiful. That's Message to Prez on the jazz
Unmute your
chamber.
speaker or increase volume to hear other participant. Really? Oh, wow. Oh, it's still going. How's that? Oh my God. All right, I gotta stop this. Stop.
That's probably why I couldn't hear you, or you couldn't hear me.
That's really weird.
You hear me now, right?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Yeah.
That is really weird because I stopped it and then I couldn't hear anything at all. All right, well, it's just another one of, it's all Apple's fault.
Anyway, that was really gorgeous. It was very,
Thanks.
very Bevan. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Large, sprawling, and got a lot of different things in it.
You
But
always you have space, you have a particular sound that comes through in your arranging. That's some people, people do that. I guess if you're a student of arrangers, you do hear that. Yeah, it's really quite beautiful. And did you say this is a project that you're working on presently?
yeah, it's really in progress. We have a lot more to do on it. I'm I have other tracks that I'm working on, but it's been, the tracks, the basic orchestral tracks were recorded quite a while ago, probably about 7-8 years ago. And
Yeah.
then slowly over the years, when I've had a little extra time, I overdubbed a couple of things. But, your point about, the sound, the particular sound, I think every arranger has their own signature. And I think for me, for this particular song, I wrote some of the words, not all of them. Some of them are Hermann Hesse, not to be confused with Herman's Hermits. There's a couple of other folks who contributed to this. And Cecily, I'd love to start, writing some stuff with you, especially, for this project. I've been so busy with teaching, I haven't reached out recently. But if you're still listening, I hope you're.
She probably is. Yeah.
But anyway, I was going to say, this being about this kind of majesty and stillness, and yet at the same time growth, there's a certain stasis that I was trying to create. And so I have a kind of a signature thing with a certain kind of suspended harmony sound. Let me put this on. Hopefully you can hear this again. It's a suspended sound that never resolves. It just stays there most of the time, as opposed to instead it's, and it just sits there, for a while.
There's
Kind
a
of
low middle note that is really stands out in that. That's unusual.
the suspended note. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right. Well, that too. Yeah. The major seventh that never resolves either. Yeah. Right. This one, the one you just sang.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when I think of trees, I often think of that sound. I don't think of this.
Right.
I don't think of that.
Cecily used to live in a redwood tree in Santa Cruz for a couple of years when she was in her early 20s, I think, right, Cess?
Oh my gosh. Well, then you're going to have to write some more words to this then. You've been on the inside. You've been there. You were behind stage with those redwoods, backstage. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's still not done yet, so
Oh, there you go, Cess.
I'm calling
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, she said that suspension captures the mystery of those trees.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I was doing that. But um, I was going to say, every arranger or composer has often a signature sound for that. We were talking about Duke Ellington earlier. One of the signature sounds of his was, as I mentioned, putting together instruments across the board from different sections together in unusual ways, whether it was trombone, clarinet, and violin, could be baritone sax, muted trombone, and flute,
Yeah.
which sounds like it won't balance, but he found a way to make it balance.
Yeah.
But everybody has, that kind of signature sound. And so what was remarkable to me, I don't know how much in my moment of technical indecision you heard of that, but what was remarkable to me was how Tierney and Joe just adopted to the sound.
Yeah.
And their sound, they're capable of many different sounds, but their sound in this piece has a certain golden, silvery restraint of quality to it, meditative almost, I would say. And yet still their personality comes through a little bit. I mean, Tierney has a mischievous side, speaking of Puck, to her, a lot of personality, and that still comes through underneath this sense of restraint. I guess what I'm talking about again is reverence, genuine reverence for this, in this case, this wonderful creation of nature that we, didn't have anything to do with, but really enhances our lives in ways we probably don't even know about. God knows we need more time in nature. I was reading a book by a Japanese author. The Japanese have a tradition of meditating and walking in woods. It's called forest bathing, and one author from Japan wrote an entire book about it, and it just reminded me. He mentions the redwoods in a couple of places, but there's so many places in Japan where you can do that, and of course, a lot of their traditional architecture even has been influenced by that.
Well, Japan has that. It has, when you get away from the cities, it has that reverence, and the people, when you get away from the cities, have it too. The farmers, and which is one reason I love Japan, because you tap into that, and the artists just add even more of that, or recognize it more, reflect it. It's really beautiful. I recently
It's great you go to Japan. It's great, and you see Philip Strange there, right?
Yeah, I've seen. Although I haven't seen him in a super long time.
Speaking of fantastic pianists, oh my God,
yeah. He recently became a father.
Oh,
for the second time, but different wife. But anyway, yeah. But recently in the last few months, I wanted to get outside and I didn't want to drive to the beach. And so I went up the 5 and I was shooting for this one place, but I saw an exit before that and it just kind of grabbed my attention. So I took it and basically ended up on like a drive in the mountains / hills that was similar to how I used to feel when I would drive up to Idlewild. And this one day I got out and I, get out and there's nobody around at all, so you're, the wind is, you're just hearing wind and stuff. And this one day there was no wind and it sounded at first like there was no sound. But then I got really quiet and I heard the silence, which is what I used to experience in Idlewild too. It's like you actually hear the silence, and there's that feeling that you say of reverence. There's a holy, connected. It's definitely irreverent. It's really, there's something really incredibly beautiful about that.
Do you feel an actual presence when you're in those
Yes,
places like that? Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
I don't know if it's the trees or.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was hearing insects too, but I wasn't hearing them like chirp, chirp, chirp. but there was some other sound that I started becoming aware of. But I also, okay, people, don't think I'm too woo-woo, but I hug my trees. So when I hug my trees, I get that same feeling. There's a presence, first of all, of the tree, but then of the trees connected to, I guess all trees are connected all over the planet. So
Yeah.
I'm feeling that connection somewhere. And there's also a really nice thing, which is that they're giving to me.
Yes.
Which is really nice, because I feel like, oh, I'm hugging you, I'm giving you something, but the trees are actually giving me something when I hug them. So it's really, I like to do that as much as possible.
I totally agree with you. I'd love to hug some trees. I just have two little fruit trees in my backyard here. There's not too many trees around in this part of Albuquerque, but I just feel connected. I mean, it's not, actually, it's the opposite of, feeling ditzy or, feeling in outer space or something. You feel really connected to the ground.
Yeah.
And to a presence that's much bigger than you. It's just that I think we dismiss, another reason I wanted to sort of, do what is kind of a tone poem about trees is that we take them for granted a lot of the time, but I think part of the reason for that is that their intelligence is so different from ours. It may not be conscious. There may be no consciousness, at least as we know it. But, when you said, you feel a presence there, there's something there that's alive, of course, and it's just moving at a much, much slower rate than us. I think one of the toughest things that we have to deal with now is, part of the misery that we endure right now is due to the internet being so, so prone to having so much misinformation and fabrication on it, but also the speed at which things go. And, you can just, go to a TV channel and you look at commercials and you see how fast the images go by. I don't know why they're produced that way anymore, because they're too fast to follow.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time, especially now in the media world, and it just goes at a speed that's not human. Not to mention, other life like trees that, are really, without them we couldn't be alive, and we really couldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
Just on a real pragmatic basis, we couldn't be here. If it wasn't for trees, they take care of the air. But they exist at a slower rate than we do, much, much slower. And the redwoods are a prime example of that for millennia. But, even at the rate that we live at, these images that go by so fast, and all this stuff, this paranoid misinformation, misleading information, all this stuff that just comes at you like sledgehammers, sometimes, very often, if you're tuned to it. It's destabilizing to me anyway, as a human being. I just want to go and settle down with a book or something and get away from it. But even better would be just walking, doing what the Japanese do, walking in the forest.
Yeah.
So I envy you being able to be in Japan sometimes and just experiencing that. But I think
over the years I've traveled throughout Japan, all ends, and the islands, the smaller islands in the north and the south, those are my favorite places. Although for cities, I like Osaka and Hiroshima better than Tokyo. But the islands they're just there's really some really beautiful things. And I think the Japanese have been brought up to, over the thousands of years, have been brought up to appreciate nature. They're actually indigenous people, right?
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And they have. And speaking of reverence, oh my gosh, it's not just I mean, they have reverence for so many cultural treasures, not just their own, but my experience with Japanese is that the reverence they have for something like jazz and classical music is just astonishing to me. They really know it.
Yeah.
And the music comes to them at an early age, and they understand it and they internalize it. Not only there, but also not Japan, but in Taiwan, for example, they have a musical education system that to me is the sine qua non, the envy of the world. Everybody has to go through music, and practically everybody, it seems to me, sings in a choir at an early age. And so that does a number of things. It not only gets you to familiarize yourself with, this great cultural treasure that we have of music, but also connectiveness, as a community, and those kind of ensembles.
Well, you know what I find really great, and for those of you who are on this a lot on the Noontime Hangs, I would one thing I really appreciate about you is that I know you're very smart, and I know you're very accomplished and really deeply involved in the creation and understanding of classical and jazz. But yet, when you speak, you're very aware of the humanity where it comes out of, and you're aware of that, and it's important to you, and that I love that. I really that just really I think that's a great thing about you.
Well, thanks. I have 7 pets here, 3 dogs and 4 cats. And
So it's not just humanity you love, right?
no. In my relatively spare time, right now I'm probably going to have a lot more because right now I'm total freelancer. I'm not teaching anymore. I have no work at all. So I have time to write, but I also have time more to spend with pets. And Jenny's been spending a lot of time with the pets because we have a couple that have some medical things that need to be taken care of. But they're doing fine. They're doing great.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought up the pets is because it sounds contradictory, but there's nothing to create empathy more than relating to small animals who need your help. Nothing. I try in my spare time to do a little bit of dog rescue or help people. At this point, it's all I can do really to help people from afar with dog rescue or keeping shelters going, non-kill shelters going. And I don't know. I think, it's funny you mentioned that because when I'm really down about things, I remember, below all this, we have our common humanity. Below all the terrible things that are going on, we all have our common humanity, and we all have these access, theoretically, to all these cultural treasures, such as music. But it does take a little bit of humanity and empathy to connect. Because when you listen to a singer, there's some singers that can just blow you away with, technique. They can go up to a high note or real easily or, whatever. But it's the humanity in their voice and also the lyrics. And, they're often singing about situations that we all share, that 4-letter word that LOVE. I can't say it, but we all share that. We all share human needs. And when you encounter a singer or an instrumentalist who conveys some of that concern, I can tell right away.
Yeah.
And it might have to do with the space that they leave for us to enter into it. It might have to do with those vocal inflections that they use to make themselves even more human, or even imperfections,
Yeah.
a rough edge or something, but not being manipulative, not being electronically, manipulated to the point where you can't even recognize the voice,
Yeah.
not being electronically, to me, shortchanged so that you lose the humanity in the sound, the immediacy of the sound. I mean, honestly, I think I've done a couple of things in music, but honestly, I feel like I have so much more to do, and especially to learn from others. And it wouldn't happen. I mean, none of it would happen if we didn't have that humanity, at the fore.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the way the world is, I don't understand a lot of abstractions. Like, to me, unfortunately, money is an invention. It's an abstraction in a way. I mean, you can have dollar bills in your wallet, but it's an invented abstraction that, as much benefit as is created, it's also exacerbated, shall we say, a lot of things, greed and acquisitiveness and cruelty. Some of it unintended, but a lot of it, intended or just not paid attention to. Music, a lot of people think of music as an abstraction, but to me it really isn't. It's part of our humanity. But you can't have it without connecting into that humanity or connecting into other living things, whether it's a small animal or a tree or something. You have to kind of feel something for them, and then all of a sudden you realize, you're connected, you're a part of something bigger, and your humanity grows that way. And so you're more receptive. I think it'd be great if everybody, I don't mean to preach or anything, and I'm not charging for this either, but, if everybody was to have that, if everybody was just to make that their first operating principle. I think a lot of people want order. They want order and predictability and control. But you can't have that first. You have to have the humanity and the love first. And that's humanity and love is inherently disorganized and often chaotic and messy, and it doesn't always, end up neatly in situations. But you have to have that first. You have to be able to connect to people first. And, and also the golden rule, just do as you would unto others as others would do unto you. And for me, music is not an abstraction in that sense. It actually is a very solid living object that doesn't just go into the air. I mean, there's a famous Eric Dolphy saying it goes into the air, but you can't keep it. But it may do that, but it's also with us. As long as you're receptive and open to that, to the expressive part of it. I love it. I don't know what I love more. I mean, I love hearing a singer and a piano player just together expressing their humanity by interacting with each other and by expressing the emotional content of a song. I love, this is why if I don't have clients, I'll do it anyway. I find a way to do it. I love working with an orchestra with string players who understand expressiveness, or saxophone players. In that piece Redwood, I had a great saxophone section. I think it was Brian Scanlon and Bob Shepard, and I think there were two other folks in there. But just the way they could play expressively, I love how it doesn't matter what it is, but as long as you can express that humanity, I love having that. I love celebrating that and seeing it. And there's nothing better, of course, than live, like right in front of it, like 3 feet away.
Yeah. I want to share with you, Larry Livingston. He was talking about when he goes to, I have him archived on this. You probably would like to listen to that one. But anyway, he was talking about when he goes to conduct an orchestra, he doesn't just say, the second violin. He gets to know everybody's name. So when he's directing them, he'll say, Susan, and that of course changes the whole, right? The whole
Yes.
dynamic of
You know,
what's happening.
that's so important. And you know what? It's funny you mentioned that because I loved talking to Larry yesterday during your
Yeah.
other Zoom meeting. And I just happened coincidentally to see a picture of him online with conducting an orchestra, and every single person in the orchestra, and this was not a Facebook thing or anything, every single person in the orchestra was labeled. You could see their names.
Oh,
And I thought, God, that's fantastic. I always wanted to, after orchestra concerts that I've been involved with, stand there and introduce every single person like a jazz thing, on second violin, back there in the corner, it's Alan Bustede, or it's, you know,
yeah.
it's, but Larry, I had a feeling he did that. That's what Bernstein did too. And Bernstein, speaking of humanity, the great humanist, I just feel there's so much we don't know from each other. I only know a little bit. I'm always trying to find out, learn more. And we can learn from trees. We can learn from, little animals. We can learn from other musicians. But we have to find out who they are too. And that's just, that example you just said is just because you're in a very tough logistical situation. You may have 100 people on stage,
Yeah.
So it takes a little effort. I mean, everybody appreciates that. That's just so great.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah. It's really nice. Yeah. Well, let's see. I have, what is this? Oh, let's see. Michael Rosen is here. He's saying, Bevan, being here now, beautiful thoughts, making sense. Let's see. Anything else? Cecily said, do you know the book Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down, How to Be Calm in a Busy World by Haman Sunim?
No, but I'd like to, yeah.
There's a lot of books like that nowadays. I mean, because I have a pile of books by my bed, and it's everything from letting go to, quieting down, or Things You're Afraid of by Pema Chodron, and, just so many things, which is a really, I think it's a real benefit. Obviously, it's a benefit for this time period because it's one of the biggest benefits actually that we can actually do some reading or watch YouTube on these people speaking that we might have passed by because we were hurrying along in our lives, And personally, what I find difficult, and I guess other people have this. I don't know if they have it to an extent that I do, but I have a few lists that have about 200 things on them that I want to do. And of course, I always try and do the the ones that seem most important and necessary. But most of those things are things I want to do, and I find it difficult to let go of. Like for instance, I leave the flute here so I can play it every day,
Wow.
And even if I get 5 minutes of long notes, that's okay because I'm trying to give myself a break, because am I going to sit and practice flute for an hour? Maybe not, because I don't play that well,
I forgot that you play flute. I completely forgot about that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. One of my favorite instruments is flute. I've written a lot of stuff for it, and again, it's such a vocal instrument. It's so expressive, and yeah, that's something we can do. Yeah, just get into something like that you really love, and and
You
work on
must
it.
have a lot of things to do.
I do. I had to put off a lot of things because I was teaching. It was part-time, but it felt like full-time because online teaching at a college right now is so challenging. But I stopped, and right now I don't have any. And
Did you stop Do you mind telling me? Did you stop because you wanted to, or did
No.
they have to let you go?
Well, they haven't let me go. It's just that the enrollment is so low that
Mm.
my classes, um, some of them just don't have enough students to be funded by the state. I mean, it's a state-funded college, so Ventura College. So there's just not enough in the classes. There's been about a 30% drop in enrollment across the board, and
Mm.
they're on the verge of cutting about 40 or 50 music classes.
Wow.
So a lot of teachers are going to be, especially adjuncts where we have no work
Yeah.
at all.
You
So
know, I was thinking, Bevan, I was gonna tell you this later, but I'll tell you now. You really should create one or several classes online.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I wrote it down when we were speaking about form and listening. I would love to, and I bet Roland would too, just as individuals, and maybe Dan. You know, I'm just thinking of people, but if you gave these continuing classes on form and listening, I mean, that would interest me a lot.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, that's something I definitely should do. I've thought about it. I just haven't had time to put it together, but
Yeah.
because I want to put together a sort of a curriculum, for lack of a better word. But yeah, I would love to do something like that. It could be done over FaceTime or probably Zoom.
Yeah.
Um, and also rhythm too. That's another thing that I would like to get into. Just very specifically over the bar line. What happens when you go over the bar line? Phrasing, hemiolas and cross rhythms and things like that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
um, uh,
Lisa Dunn is here, and she says she'll be there too.
oh, cool. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, I'll let you know.
Oh, Dennis Streeth is here. Hi, Dennis.
Hey, Dennis. I can't hear you, but I can see you.
No. Well, let's see. Roland also said he knows you're a busy music creator. Just wondering if you're still working on orchestrating that beautiful gem with Will Brahm, that Will Brahm composed.
I have the sheet music that Will sent me. I actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I had to put it aside for a couple of months while just pretty much every creative project I had to put aside while I was teaching. But I've been working on it. It's going to be for, actually speaking of flute, I conceived it. It's a beautiful tune by Will, and I conceived it for two flutes, also flute and also low piccolo, doubling on low piccolo, one doubling on low piccolo, and the other on alto flute, and string quartet, and some percussion, some and bass, jazz oriented bass. So yeah, I'm working on that. And as a matter of fact, I just connected with some string players locally. There's a possibility I may figure out a way to record it just here in Albuquerque, which would be,
Oh,
but I have to do it all one person at a time by GarageBand. Um, uh, but yeah, I'm working on things like that. There's a bunch of small things that I've put aside that I'm going to work on.
what
Jenny
about
just,
what about that big, huge piece that you're ending with the song that I wrote?
well, that's called The Blood Price. Basically, it's almost done, but I have to add a lot of narration to it. It's about half an hour long, and it's about, speaking of humanity, it's about the price we pay for war, and how it's happened. It keeps the same situations, like almost the exact same situations keep happening over centuries in time, and how we as a people, as a humanity, get misled, and how there is an alternative that comes out at the end, and that's partly where your song comes in. That's a huge project. I have to get the right narrator for that. I was actually thinking of trying to reach Sean Penn because I think he would be perfect for it. So yeah, I've talked to a couple of people in LA about that. I have to get some funding also. That's a huge piece. And I've also been working on, actually, I haven't had to worry about money with this one because it was a commission, but I wrote a concerto for jazz guitar and orchestra, chamber orchestra. A couple of early versions of it were actually performed in Ventura County by Channel Islands Chamber Orchestra, and which is a great little group based in Ventura. But I recently rewrote it for classical guitar, essentially. The board decided they were going to record it as well as some other pieces from the same program that it was on. A huge project. And of course, recording right now live is, fraught with issues. There have been some sessions that have been going on at Fox and Sony where they have basically half the size of the normal orchestra out on the floor and a lot of protection and I guess some baffles. But still, recording live is a real issue right now. So they're working on setting up a time about 6 months from now, perhaps even in the late fall, where they can do this, where maybe the situation will be a little more beneficial for everybody. So we'll see what happens with that. But the reason I brought that up is because it's another big orchestrational project. I've rewritten it. I rewrote it for classical guitar, but then I also, changed the orchestration a lot because of some emotional things that happened over this year. The death of my father and the fact that I'm not in LA, a little bit removed from everything. And although there's a wonderful scene here in Albuquerque, but of course it's shut down like everywhere else. I was thinking a lot about expressive things. I mean, each songwriter, for instance, someone like Will, who's a brilliant guitarist, but I also think, I don't know why, this may be just coincidental, but I just know a lot of brilliant guitarists who are great songwriters. Hans Ottsen in Ventura County writes brilliant Tristano-esque tunes. He was the original jazz soloist, actually, on this piece.
Oh, I remember him, yeah.
And Will, of course, is brilliant guitarist. The last gig I played in LA before leaving for Albuquerque was with Will, and I think Kim Richmond sat in on it. It was Marina Pakowski's gig a jazz gig in Burbank, with Will Lyle on bass, and I can't remember. I know someone was on drums. Oh, Kevin Vanden Elzen was on drums, and so I know of Will as a simply brilliant guitarist, jazz-wise, but also he's a brilliant songwriter in that form. Jim Hall was a brilliant songwriter. I know some guys you might know in the Bay Area, Dave McNabb,
Yeah.
brilliant player, but great songwriter also. And Tom Rizzo in LA, brilliant.
He was
brilliant.
on our project.
Yes, he's on the great Jazz Chamber Orchestra project
Yeah.
With us. And I don't know what it is about guitarists. I don't know, maybe it's singer-songwriter thing. But anyway, but you have to emotionally put yourself where they're at, you have to try to figure out where they're coming from, because you can just look at the elements of a tune and, just say, wow, that would be great for string quartet, or that would be great for big band, or, whatever ensemble you're thinking of. But you have to kind of go into the emotional aspect. This is another thing about our common humanity, what they're trying to express. Will is really I don't know. He's otherworldly in some
He is. And he
emotional
loves
states.
that whole Spanish flavored thing.
Yeah,
He's a very it's like he's a very clean being, you know what I mean? And it comes through with the music. It's very sparkling or
he is clean. He also
yeah.
has great haircuts too. You know,
And
just
he's always dressed really cleanly.
really cleanly. Yeah, I wish I could learn from him that
You know
way.
who I spoke to a few months ago was Steve Cardenas.
Oh, speaking of great guitarists, yeah,
Yeah, great guitar player, great writer. Yeah,
yeah,
he's so musical. Yeah.
yes, yes. He's another one. I don't know what it is about guitarists, but um, uh, it's such a I mean, it's an instrument that so many people play, and again, singer-songwriters, have it's a thing,
Anthony Wilson, singer songwriter.
Yeah,
And I mean,
another
Larry
one.
Coons is kind of unique in
Yeah.
himself. But I don't know if I ever told you this. I played a gig with he and his dad. The
Oh, wow.
dad's a guitarist as well.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
right.
ever played with him, but
Dave.
yeah, Dave.
Yeah,
And I swear it was mind blowing because they were from the same musical universe.
right.
I was so blown out. I'm a big fan of guitar anyway, because,
Yeah.
I just love that. But I was really
Larry,
intrigued.
Larry is just, Larry has, on top of the fact that, all the experience that he has, Cleo Lane and,
Yeah.
people like that. But, um, and aside from being very musical and everything, but he's a great, he can also submerge himself, and this is another thing. As arrangers, we have to do this too. We have to submerge ourselves. And yeah, I mean, I tend to go out on a limb. I mean, I have a lot of ideas, so I want to develop things and I see things, but one has to submerge oneself in the humanity of the situation. Actually, I heard Larry, it was a simple thing, but I heard Larry recently online with Judy Carmichael.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and he just completely submerged himself in what
In
was
that style.
in that style and what she was doing. And I, a lot of younger players, no criticism at all, but I mean, they might not have known what to do.
Yeah.
But he just completely submerged himself and he was so supportive in that role that he created for himself. He was recognizing her humanity and what her thing,
Yeah.
which was totally different from what I think of him normally.
Yeah. I
But he was
spoke to
able
him
to do it.
about that too. Yeah. He said he was actually nervous at first because Judy is a stride player for those of you who don't know her, and she's
Yeah,
fabulous at that.
yeah,
And to have Larry come in, who does not live in stride, was really an interesting choice. But they also got along, like you were saying, recognizing the humanity in each other. And I think that makes a big difference when you're a musician, even if you've never played the same style. If you have affinity for each other, you're already connected.
exactly. Yeah, you have to be, you have to, play the psychic room.
Yeah,
You have to be in that room
yeah,
for it to happen, and you also need a room. You need a room. Speaking of which, I noticed. I've noticed. Speaking of rooms, I just the outpouring of pain, I guess, in a way, and plaudits also because of the blue whale now
oh,
formally
yeah,
closing down. You need a room like that. You need a room where you can really have a situation where people listen. I mean, and that was one of those places where there was deep listening going on. Where
deep
there was
listening.
potential for deep listening going on in Ventura County. When they reopen Squash Grapes, the jazz club there, I know it will be like that.
Yeah,
I know. I'm just grateful that they're surviving somehow.
yeah,
Um, but you need a room. You need a locale. You need a a place of reverence, where, I guess speaking of Japan, I think of those shrines, they're humble. They're
Yeah,
very local,
very.
made of bamboo and wood, and they're very local, and it's a place. It's a place where you can set yourself down and, have your feet on the ground, and yet, your spirit is flying, in
Yeah.
the air at the same time. You need a room for that kind of listening and that kind of reverence.
Yeah.
Some of those shrines would be great jazz clubs, I guess, but
Right.
you
I
have to
have a
find the right
friend,
you have to find the right booking agent though, with a lot of
definitely.
reverence.
I have some friends who you would love in Japan. They, when I first went to Japan, it was, many years ago when singers were going to the Playboy clubs there. So that's what I did. I went to the Playboy Club first in Tokyo for 6 weeks and then for 6 weeks in Osaka. And in Osaka, the band, I just absolutely fell in love with the people. And the bass player and I just totally lost it when I had to go home. I mean, I just totally, just so connected. And his wife is a pianist and he's a bass player. They spent time in Brazil, which just makes me tickled. And they live in an old home that's very it's almost like a Harry Potter style home. It's like really quirky. And I think it was a family home. And right on the same property, which is kind of up on a little hillside, is a shrine that whomever their family member built. And it's
Oh,
one of
wow.
those small, intimate shrines, but it's significant there. And so yeah, and the last time I saw him, actually in March, I was supposed to go, right? And I was going to play with my old band.
Hmm.
And I was so looking forward to it. And the time before, I I I saw my friend show, the bass player, and he doesn't speak English. So, and my Japanese is, somewhat limited, 20, 25 words or something. Although I have this affinity and empathy for the language and the people speaking, so I usually understand kind of. But
Hmm.
my friend Yuka Akai, who you may have met here,
Yeah.
she she was there and she was translating, and she was absolutely hysterical because apparently Sho was speaking kind of like we're speaking, but super, super spiritually. And she was like, she was like, I don't even know how to put this into another language, what he's saying. So it would be great for you guys to play and to meet
Oh,
sometime
yeah.
in the
Yeah.
future. You really dig each other a lot, I'm
Right.
sure.
I'm sure the music will make it universal. It's
Yeah.
universal. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Well,
Wow.
I know that I'm sorry. I know you were going to only stay for an hour, but here you are at the
No,
end
it's
of two
okay.
hours.
It's okay. I thought I had some pet duties, but
Oh, okay.
they were
They were tended to
they were tended to. So far so good. I
by Miss
got
Jenny.
another 10 minutes. Yeah, I do too. She's busy with her philosophy group a lot of the time, so which is great
Did
here.
she hook up with Amy Jane Johnson, the woman I told you about who was a singer and an artist in Albuquerque?
I think they spoke on the phone,
Oh,
but
okay.
that was like in March, I think.
Oh, yeah, because you and I talked a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to re-hook you up. But so I think, and others here think that you should create some classes, online classes that we'll join, and it would be really great. And also, somebody mentioned playing. It would be great to have you do online concerts.
Yeah,
And you have
yeah.
you get virtual tip jars, which people gladly do. Or else like Tamir actually does every Saturday, and you have to buy a ticket to be on the Zoom.
Nice, nice. That's
So
great.
you should do that,
Yeah, I have to look
Bevan.
into that. My piano is a little out of tune, to say the least, which is why I was playing electric
Yeah.
piano here. You can see my tiny little
Yeah.
keyboard, but my real piano, which is over there, is is pretty out of tune. So I was trying to figure out what to do. I haven't.
You don't tune pianos?
I wish I could, but I don't dare. If I did that, I'd probably, it'd probably catch on fire or something. I'm kind of a klutz with mechanical stuff, but I got a recommendation from a guy I work with in Texas for a piano tuner in Santa Fe. So hopefully
Oh,
we'll figure out something. But yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And also, I have talked to some people as disparate as Brad Dutz and some horn players. There are ways to do this. I mean, if we can all send each other sound files, we can
yeah.
create some things. Just somebody can mix them on Pro Tools, and then we can do a virtual concert, which is, I was part of that with teaching, and at the school we did. I think everybody's doing this. We did a number of virtual
Yeah.
concerts, but I just haven't had time to do that. I think that would be really great. The live thing is a whole nother issue. There are some rehearsal platforms that I've tried working with. One is SoundJack and the other one is Jamulus. And I think it's just because I'm in New Mexico. I'm pretty far away from LA. They don't work as well as if you were within, say, 100 miles, of the next person you're working with. But I did have some success with it. There's a big band in Ventura County, and I did a couple of rehearsals with them, and it almost was together, just about. But there were times when I felt like it's a latency issue,
Yeah.
technically speaking. I'm going to keep working with those because I think that would be great to do some live, streaming
Yeah.
of some
I
sort.
know. Damn, the latency thing. But you would have thought that it would have gotten fixed by now.
I think SoundJack is coming pretty close to solving it. It's just that
Really?
it's a real bear to learn. And again, if you're within 500 miles of the people you're playing along with,
It's better.
it's better.
Yeah.
I'm 500 miles too far away. I guess Chick will have to write another tune. Instead of 500 miles high, it's 500 miles too far away.
Isn't SoundJack the one that like Orange County University guy got going? Was that it, SoundJack, or was that?
No, that's Jamulus.
Oh.
Well, I don't know if he's in Orange County, but he is in California, I believe. SoundJack is a German thing. There's a guy in Germany who, you have to almost read his thesis on latency to understand how to use it. It's quite complex, but I did have some initial success with it, but it takes about 2 or 3 hours sometimes to just get everything set up.
Oh boy.
At least for me, anyway. I think, again, if you are within, a couple hundred miles proximity of each other, I don't think it will be so difficult. Jamulus is a lot easier to use, and there are others too. Jamulus is much easier. There's the danger of people who you don't even know just showing up on your session, but there are ways of, keeping it private if you learn enough about it.
I couldn't download Jamulus. I tried after the last time I spoke to you,
Oh,
and there was something about my computer. I can't remember what it was. Might just be because I have an older Mac.
oh, you know what it might be? I think a lot of people have encountered this. Because it's a developer who's not so widely recognized,
Yeah.
your computer, your own computer's guard stuff, security says that they won't allow it to be downloaded because it's from an unknown developer. So you have to go into your security and protocols thing, whatever you have, and say, I want to give permission to unknown developers to let them, let me upload or download or what,
Yeah.
sideload or whatever.
Side load.
Sideload, yeah. They'll come up with that, that's for sure. Instead of sideman, we'll all be sideloads. I think that might be it because some other people have had that issue and they did overcome it. And the thing about Jamulus that's really nice is that you can create your own server. And so, all those servers that people created are posted, and you can go up and down and pick the server you're going to be on.
Yeah.
And everybody else goes to the same server, and you can actually see everyone else. It looks like a mixing board, like an old mixing board, and you can actually mix everybody, so that you can hear them, the way you want.
Now I have this real craving to sing with you.
Well,
now we're talking about it. It's like
I know.
I really want to sing.
I did it once. I got Marina to download Jamulus. It took a while, but she was able to do it, and we were able to rehearse. But again, there's a latency thing from Albuquerque. But I'd love to do that with you. And we talked about recording with a larger ensemble. That song of mine, "Looking for Bill."
Oh yeah.
That's on my list. But that's something we can do with with Logic and GarageBand and stuff.
I just want to share this story with people listening. But the first time I met Bevan, it was in Boston, and I had been living in LA, and I went back to Boston to have a gig at what was the big room there?
Oh, Scullers, maybe?
Scullers, yeah. So I had this gig at Scullers, and I'm from Boston, so no problem filling the room. All old family and friends. But I didn't know anybody. And Tony Ballard was a singer that I knew. And I don't even remember how I knew Tony, but I knew her for a long time. And I knew her, I must have been interviewed on her radio TV show or something. But anyway, so she introduced me to Bevan. So I went over to Bevan's apartment in Cambridge. And I remember he had a few cats. And basically the whole place was the piano. Basically, it was geared around the piano, and he sat down and he said, "Oh, I don't even know if you had heard me sing yet, but you said, oh, listen to the song that I wrote," and he pulled it out. It was a dedication to Bill Evans called "Looking for Bill," and what was so weird was, or for me anyway, was that it was in my key. And it had intervals like I like big intervals. And that was just the weirdest. And it was a waltz, which I love waltzes. So it was really like you almost wrote it for me. It was like, oh my God, this is. And so Bevan and I have recorded that song. Let's see, we recorded it on the.
That was a really cool album with all those compilations, all those different piano players.
Yeah.
God, you had some really good ones. Really, who's the guy who retired? Amaro and Lloyd. Was it Lloyd? Lou.
Oh, Lou Matthews was on.
I love Lou. Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
Yeah, he was really good.
Yeah, that was a great album. Yeah, but I'd love to do it with a larger ensemble. That's right. I forgot that you had come over. I had a little baby grand that was beat up in my apartment on Trowbridge Street. I was living right next to Matt Glazer, who used to run the string department at Berkeley.
Oh,
old friend of mine, and I think he was listening because I could hear hysterical laughter, which is often Matt.
I don't remember that part, but
I could hear Matt. That was Matt's. Matt was around when you could hear hysterical laughter.
Those are the days when you're young and you're living in an apartment with paper thin walls and stuff. Yeah. Right. When I lived in San Francisco, I literally could hear the guy peeing in his bathroom.
Probably a way to record that too. I don't know.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, Bev, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for coming on for Gina, and Gina sending you lots of love. And she was feeling a little under the weather.
It gets better.
Many people will be, Sharon Kay or Kendall. I'm not sure which one they're on, but
you're on Kendall. Hi, love your drumming. Hope we get.
We're gonna be waiting for your either courses or your live performances. Okay.
Gotcha. You got me started thinking about that. That's a great idea. I haven't thought about it. Thank you to Cecily and I think it was Michael or someone else who was suggesting that. Oh, Roland.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, suggesting that. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably going to be, that definitely has got to be in the future, for sure. I know this, the next couple of months will be very busy. I mean, not only this big project with the one chart that you heard, I'm working on some other things too, to try to get them out. But I would love to have more of a presence online. I have a few things on SoundCloud like everybody else, and I have my resume and things like I'm on IMDb Pro and for my film stuff, and I've got my website and things like that. But everybody has that. But I think as teaching online, I learned this semester it's a great way to be connected, and this would be a way to do it without so much bureaucracy,
Yes.
extra paperwork. Just concentrate on the music.
Yes.
So I thank you for that. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
definitely.
you for your humanity too. Kathy, you're such a great community organizer. You bring people together. I was reminded of that yesterday. The big recording we did, the Jazz Chamber project, brought so many people together. It felt like a community, a real, for
Yeah.
quite some time. That was probably one of the greatest things about stuff like that is bringing people together. And I'd love to work with Fish to Birds again, and oh gosh, the list goes on and on. So
Yeah. I think what I will do too, as we say goodbye, and you can hang out or not hang out if you'd like, but I think I might play Star Eyes because that was just such a very beautiful arrangement that you did on the Jazz Chamber. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I ever told you, but Benny Maupin, when he first got the record, he said Star Eyes was always what he played it every time he got in his car. He had it.
wow, well that's nice. That's great.
Yeah.
Benny is such a great musician. I really went out on a limb with the writing I did for that. It's got some weird things going on in it. It was a little bit of a different thing, but I remember us talking about the conception of it. You wanted something in 3/4. You kind of it appealed to you that way. And, I remember just trying a couple of vamps with you, and then it grew into this sort of giant, again, has some classical. This is an example of a chart that has there's probably a little Gil Evans in there somewhere, but also some classical influence, all premeditated, of course, written out. Great players too that,
Yeah.
the budget was able to bring Chuck Finley and some of the best string players in LA, and
Joe LaBarbera.
Joe LaBarbera and
Well, I think it was Kenny Wilde on that one on the bass.
I think it was the other. It was Edwin.
Edwin, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Edwin Livingston. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Great bass player who is on another album of mine. But for your thing, you had a lot of bass players. I think there was Kenny and there was Edwin and someone else too.
Oh, there
Frank
was
Electric.
we used yeah, blah blah blah. I almost wanted to say Dave Parlata. Reminds me of him. Yeah, I can't remember his name.
There was
Yeah,
a third guy. I can't.
yeah, there was an electric player.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. What a great bunch of musicians. And then of course, so you can try a lot of things with, knowing you have those kind of folks, you can try a lot of things. So I got a little ambitious here, and then the reharmonization too, is from what I remember, was pretty radical. Again, when you have Joe and Edwin and I'm not sure. I can't remember if Tom Rizzo was playing on that or not.
I think he was
Yeah.
because we did have Jamie Rosen, but I think that was on like Message to Prez. We had Steve
Yeah.
Haas on Message
Oh
to
yes,
Prez.
Steve. Yeah.
Um,
So many great players. Oh, jeez.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you create, you and Dan Davila create such great situations to bring people together.
Thanks.
I just wish I could, do that all the time. It's just, I feel very
Oh, me too. And
grateful.
by the way, Dory was on earlier.
Oh,
But actually, Dan and I have been co-producing a record for the last year or so on a film composer who wanted to come out with her second record, Catherine Bostic, and it's almost finished. And it's a mind-blowing project. It's
oh,
it's
wow.
it's not a jazz project. I can hear her film composition, but it's also kind of Americana and
Mhm.
I don't want to say acoustic rock because it's not really acoustic particularly, but it maybe Americana, but it's incredible. She's a really incredible songwriter, kind of almost Joni Mitchell-ish, and she has a really definitive voice. You'll like hearing the project. It's really
Yeah,
quite nice.
I'd love to hear that. So you're not done yet. You're almost
Just
done.
about done. We're actually finishing the mixing.
Great.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
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 But yeah, I'll just share this on our way out of our Star Eyes, and this is Bevan's arrangement, and we did this at East West Studios in Hollywood.
Oh, star eyes, that to me is what your eyes are. Soft as stars in April skies are. Tell me someday you'll fulfill their promise of a thrill. Star eyes, flashing eyes in which my hopes rise. Let me show you where my heart lies. Let me prove that it adores that loveliness of yours. All my life I felt content to stargaze at the skies. Now I only want to melt the stardust in your eyes. Star eyes, when if ever will my lips know if it's for me for whom those eyes glow. Makes no difference where you are, your eyes still hold my wishing star. How lovely you are. Star eyes, me is what your eyes are. Soft as stars in April skies are. Won't you tell me they'll fulfill their promise of a thrill? Star eyes, flashing eyes in which my hopes rise. Let me show you where my heart lies. Let me prove that it adores that loveliness of yours. All my life I felt content to stargaze at the skies. Now I only want to melt that stardust in your star eyes. When, if ever, will my lips know if it's for me for whom those eyes glow? Makes no difference where you are. Your eyes still hold my wishing star.
Oh, Bev, that was so good.
Wow.
Talking about players, you know, who play within the form but play soloish, so you know, with a
Yeah.
unique voice.
Yeah.
Really beautiful playing too.
Yeah, boy, I really went out on a limb in some of those spots. But I was thinking stars, you know, star eyes, you know, spacey. But wow, you sounded great on that. I haven't listened to that for a while. I have a backlog of albums I'm supposed to listen to, and I got to put that on my list. Boy, that was, yeah, Chuck Finley, and especially I think it was Ben Hudson and Amy Hirschberger, the violinists, and Andrew Schulman on cello, really nice. And also, you know, Joe just is so complimentary. He plays complimentary. You know, he's very,
Yeah.
gets the momentum going. And who was it? Lolly on vibraphone, and it must have been two wind players. I can't remember who it was, but I'll look on the jacket. But yeah, no, it's you know, really, really great players. Boy, I really put you through some paces on that one. Boy.
Yeah. Well, luckily I was you know, I was already accustomed to doing it as a waltz.
Yeah, you made it swing. You swung the vocal, which was great. You know, it just because I noticed, like I don't know if I can't remember how we planned it out in the session, but I noticed, you know, of course with string players, those lines have to be straight because, you know, most of them don't swing.
Yeah.
So there was the question of, do the winds do that also? Or there was kind of I could hear there was kind of an uneasy sort of balance between that. I mean, they were trying to make it work. So, you know, there was a it was definitely a thing, but you just said, okay, I'm swinging. So that really worked. Great. That really, yeah. Jeez. Wow. I gotta find that chart. I know I have a whole box of things somewhere, but
Well,
I tell you this,
thanks, Bev.
well, thank you. This was so much fun. I mean, and so great to hear from people, who I know. I don't know. Is there a way to look at the chat? I mean, I don't know if.
Yes, there is. You can both. You can. Sometimes Facebook has been doing, does whatever it wants. Right now, I just see that perhaps, I don't know, on my phone I can see us happening, but on my computer, it shut the video down. Normally, I save it from the computer, so I'll have to save it from YouTube instead of Facebook, which will take a little while. But you
Okay.
can probably, I think you can see all the chat.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Because I always like responding to, if somebody like Roland asks a question or something,
Yeah.
I probably will have more thoughts down the road, but I can always also, I can. Oh, I have something called react. Oh no, that's just like emojis or something. Reactions. Yeah, that's just emojis. But the chat here, it must just be yours and we stopped, so it's off now. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, it's. Oh, you mean on Zoom?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Zoom is not what. I mean, I didn't stop actually. So we may still be live on Facebook. I'm not sure. But anyway, you can still go to my Facebook and see the chat, regardless of if the
Okay.
if you can't see it.
Okay.
Now, I think I can see it, so we're still there.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
So,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. It was really nice to have you. And tomorrow, a really wonderful singer, Allison Wedding, will be on, and she's now she lives in Florida and teaches at Frost. She's a beautiful singer and great teacher. So she'll be on tomorrow,
12 noon.
12 noon.
Great. Thank you again, Cathy. This was great. And thanks to everybody who's listening. And, we're all connected. That's all I can say.
Yes, we are. Love you, Bev.
Love you too. So keep in touch and I'll keep you posted.
Okay.
All right.